I just felt like I had found a treasure when I found Lee Harper in History Bones, because of her choice of her stories she tells and the way she tells them. I even have my own Lee Harper shirt on today, my History Bones shirt. But what a true creative spirit she is. And first found her, I think Steve found her on Facebook, and then she came over last October and brought some spooky stuff and fun stuff. And now I just follow her all the time. She's getting famous worldwide out there. And so I'm so grateful that she would come today. And I remember asking her, how the heck did you get started on this? It all started with Elf on the Shelf.
It did.
So I'm going to just say, Lee Harper, take it away. Tell us about your art and yourself.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I wanted to say first, I was planning on saying thanks for coming out in the rain, because leaving Oxford this morning it was pitch black and pouring rain, but it's sunny now, so here we go. Anyway, I brought History Bones pieces and just miniature buildings and stuff today, just to show the variety of things that I make. But so it's two different series, but History Bones did start out with Elf on the Shelf, or actually my intense dislike for Elf on the Shelf, because I think he's a creep and he spies on you and tattles. So when my son was probably 5 or 6, that was many, many years ago now, I thought, instead of Elf on the Shelf, I'll do a skeleton every day of the week for Halloween and make him do something funny. And he doesn't tattle on you, and he's just fun. And I mean, it started out as just you guys remember the old Gumby figure? It was rubber, but it had a wire in it, so it would stay. I found a skeleton like that, and I just made him do just silly stuff all week. Seriously, just anything. And then I found an acorn in the driveway, and I noticed the cap of it looks like a tiny beret, and so I stuck that on his head, and then it was just off to the races after that. Every Halloween, it got more and more detailed, and then after a while, and I was sending them to my nieces and nephews as well, for just for fun. And after a while, I realized these kids don't care about this anymore as much as I do. So I'm commandeering it and I'm going to do obscure history scenes. Why? I don't know. I love history, but I like obscure history, not the stuff that everybody's heard before. So over the years, when I come across something, just little tidbits here and there, and that will also make for a good visual display. Some things are better than others for that. And I have to really like them, because these don't really sell. They're so niche. They're just a labor of love, and they're just their own little series. Honestly, they'd be great in a book where you could see the pictures and read. You have to read about them, because if you're just looking at them, you have no idea. That's why they're obscure. But anyway, they're fascinating. And people were like, oh, when did you decide to become a miniaturist? And I honestly never decided to be a miniaturist. It just happened to be, because I had been a painter and a maker of things forever, for a living. But the size of that skeleton, those Halloweens, dictated the sizes of the scenes. And so just organically, this is the size that it ended up with. But it's super fun, and I was doing them for years, and my husband was sharing them on Facebook, and I had no idea. I was like a complete Luddite, not on any social medias whatsoever. And he said, people are wanting to know when your Halloween stuff's coming. I was like, what? Okay, so there was like a crew that was looking forward to the pieces each year. So my friend finally said, you need to make its own History Bones, its own Instagram account. So I do have one that's regular stuff, and then one that is just History Bones, because for some reason skeletons creep some people out, but honestly, the more I started thinking about it, they started out as funny, but the more I thought about it, for centuries, every culture has used skeletons in art, and they do symbolize, they're kind of a great equalizer. They, before you put skin or hair or clothing on anybody, you don't know their age, their race, their gender. You know nothing about, it could be a pauper, it could be a king. So I kind of like the way that that figures into these. But the most fun I think about these, besides just looking at tiny things are fun, each story is incredible. And as far as like the buildings, I do a lot of commissions for people, and those are all, they're all very sentimental as well. They're people's memories or stories, things that spark childhood memories. I made this little truck with, remember, who used to ride their bikes behind the fog machine growing up? I just, for some reason, one day I just thought, I need to make that fog truck. I don't know why, and I made a little stop motion movie of it, where, it's just kind of cranking down the street. But anyway, I'm from Meridian, and this one is the Union Hotel, which has been restored now, but growing up, I loved the huge mural. On the side is a big Wrigley's spearmint gum and the You Need a Biscuit ad. But it was built in 1902, and it was right across the street from the railroad, and so it was huge for Meridian. That was its heyday. People were riding the rails, and you could get a room for $2 in 1902, which is fun to think about. But anyway, it did fall into disrepair, but it has been restored now, and the bottom is shops and offices, and the tops they've made into apartments and condos. So that's really fun. This is a work in progress I brought, and I wanted to show my process for making things. When I start a piece, read a bunch about it, and then I print a ton of pictures of all kinds of angles and details, and I have them splattered all over the place. And then I brought this. I made a Instagram post about figuring out how to do. You guys know the old glass blocks? You know what I mean? They're bubbly. They're not perfectly flat. I figured out with the hot glue and hardware cloth and paint how to make those, and the light shines through. I was so giddy that it worked. I'm sorry. Little bitty things excite me. But anyway, I brought the little sample piece, and you can see it in this one too. But each one of these pieces, I brought the folder for each, because I do research for the subject. And then I try to have, you can see I do sketches on some, and then some are just lots of photos. This one in particular, this is really special to me, because usually the skeletons are just a regular skeleton, but this is Joseph Merrick, the Elephant Man. I'm sure most of you have seen the movie. It's absolutely heartbreaking. And they do have it's not his bones, but they have a replica of his skeleton at the London Hospital Museum. And his skull is so incredibly unusual. And I thought that'd be perfect to try to make. So, I tried so hard to duplicate. I think I got it pretty close, but I tried to give him a little dignity that he, did not get most of his life. His life is so sad. And then his outfit here that he wore to go out. But what I did find, I love finding facts like this, like I thought I knew a lot about him. He actually, with that gigantic hand, the left side of his body, everything was enormous. He worked on miniature kits with that big hand, which is insane. They weren't like completely handmade, but they were kits and miniature. And that one of those miniatures is in the museum with him as well. And then it has letters and his books and music and all the cultured things that he liked to do. It's just a regular person, just like us. And interesting fact, if you want to appreciate medicine these days, he had what we now know is Proteus syndrome, but they called it elephantitis, or they called it something, but they truly believed he looked like that because his mother, while she was pregnant, saw an elephant and got really frightened. That is what that was believed. Anyway, so that's an interesting one. This one is really cool. Barber surgeons. I don't know if anybody's heard of barber surgeons, but up until the 19th century in several countries, you could go to the barber shop and get your arm set, boils lanced, your haircut, your give blood, bloodletting, everything. They were not, surgery and barbershops were not separated until somewhere in the early 1800s or late 1800s or early 1900s. But if you can imagine, again, the pain, like they didn't have much as far as anesthesia. They probably had things you could bite on. I'm sure it wasn't sterile. Infection killed people as many times as much as, whatever you had. Also, the origin of the barber pole, the stripes, that's part of this whole thing. The bloody rags that they used when they did bloodletting, they would hang that on outside on a white pole to advertise, hey, we do bloodletting in here. And so, and when the wind would blow them, it would kind of like make that shape, and that is why when you see a barber pole, the white and red stripe, that is where that is from. The other fun thing that I just found out recently is they were, y'all aren't going to believe this, but they were known as the place to get the hot gossip in town, news and gossip. And it got so bad at one time, there were people crowded all in the barbershops, not to get any procedures done, but just to get the tea, that the barbers were like, okay, you guys need to find somewhere on the public square and somebody speak, like somebody take this out. But I thought, some things never change. I mean, do you not get a lot of your hot goss from your salon? But anyway, that one's fun, and there are a lot of fun images in that one too. This one is the lobotomobile, and this one is it's really tragic. What year was it? Early 1900s, 1930s. Walter Freeman developed the ice pick lobotomy method. He was not a real surgeon. I want to make that clear. He was a doctor, but he was not a surgeon, and he figured out that with those, just like what you're imagining, as crude as you can think, this guy thought, oh my God, I'm fixing to make a mark on medicine. I'm taking this show on the road. So he literally had a van. He did not call it the lobotomobile, but people named it that later. He went across the country to universities, hospitals, any kind of asylums, and he would do free presentations on a person. Yeah, and back then you could have been taken to an asylum, especially women, just for being depressed, or a little too big for your britches. Your husband could put you in an asylum. I mean, it was incredible. Anyway, he performed 3,500 of these procedures in 23 states in just a few years, and he used to, imagine this is crazy, he tore the sleeves off of his shirt so he could be sleeveless, and he loved to pose doing the procedure in real time to people. And a person died one time because he was showboating too much, and he, missed or whatever. Can you even imagine? But anyway, that died out after a while, mainly because there were better procedures and also the invention of like antidepressants and medicines that we know now. But this is horrific. This is so tragic. He also did them on kids as young as 4. If you can imagine that. His most famous patient, which was a secret for years, was Rosemary Kennedy, John Kennedy's sister. And she was born with learning disabilities, not severe, but just enough. And when she was 21, I guess she was getting a little too much to handle. And her father, who was running for office, was, at that time you hid people in your family that were embarrassing. You just hid them away in an asylum or upstairs or whatever. He took, without asking his wife, without even telling her, took her to Walter Freeman's, and he did that on the spot to her, and she had the mental capacity of a 3-year-old. After that, when she was 21, and she lived in an asylum until she was 80-something in that state. And that the kids did not even know about her until many, many, many years later. And if anything good came out of that, John Kennedy, once he found out, he went to visit her and did end up creating programs for people that are, just shoved off to institutions and stuff. So a little bit of good came out of that. But anyway, this one is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but it's supposed to because the whole story is so ludicrous. I thought it kind of needed it. Anyway, this is the Mayflower Cafe. I'm sure a lot of people have eaten here in Jackson. I just started that this week, and I wanted to show you kind of what a work in progress. Like, it starts off as nothing, just a bunch of nothing. This one is really fun. This is one of my heroes. Frances Glessner Lee is the mother of forensic science. And the other fun thing about this is it's a miniature of her working on a miniature. She is famous for creating the nutshell studies, which are a series of dioramas that are exactly based on real crime scenes. And, to the letter. And they are still used at the Baltimore ME's office to train detectives on how to read a crime scene. Because when she was coming up in the 50s, her parents would not let her go into law. They wouldn't let her go into law enforcement because ladies didn't do that or whatever. Anyway, and they were a very, very wealthy family. And so when her parents died and she was in her 60s, she started making all these and was the first woman on the Baltimore Police Department's board or whatever, but she gave all kinds of money to the forensic science department and helped revolutionize how people read crime scenes. For instance, if you see old movies and you see like a dozen cops walking around with coffee cups and putting their cigarettes out, and just walking all over everything, that's how they used to do it. She trained them to, how to preserve a crime scene and how to read it. But her pieces really influenced me growing up. And I don't know, who's seen the old Jason and the Argonauts movie? You remember the Skeleton Army scene? Ray Harryhausen. He was one of the godfathers of special effects. And if you see his movies now, they look super crude, but back then, that was big time high tech. He invented all these cool sci-fi effects and ways to use the camera. But anyway, that and his stuff and the Skeleton Army and Frances Glessner Lee are probably my biggest influences for history buns. But anyway, I brought this book. This is a bunch of her pieces, but I opened it up to the piece that I actually did. And this little log cabin is made out of toothpicks. And I just about went blind making that. But I love the way it turned out. So anyway, I thought if y'all wanna come up and like look at the papers or you need to look at them really closely. And if you have any questions, I'd love to answer them. I honestly can't think of anything else to say. My child is in college right now, so I haven't been making many new history bones lately. I had to make ones that actually sell. But I will definitely keep making them. I probably have 30 or 40 pieces. Most of them are at my house. Some of the little single people, they are all over the country, and some are even in, I think I've got a couple in England. So they're little history bones people out there all over the place. So they're really fun. But it's fun. I started a TikTok, don't laugh, but they are really fun because they're very conversational. And it's a hoot to talk to people people have never heard these stories. And a lot of the people I cover should be in history books. And there's only a tiny amount of space for most, there are a million stories, a million cool people that are just almost completely forgotten from history that are incredible. I mean, they could be their own movies that are already written pretty much. Just amazing. Hello, Hollywood. They need to do that.
Do you have a list of things that you're going to do?
I do. It's really loose, and honestly, people are like, which one are you going to do next? And honestly, I don't know until it kind of strikes me, because you really have to want to do them, because if you don't want to, it's hard to get motivated. But I feel very passionately about the ones I have made, because people need to know them. They're just amazing stories.
Tell a story about bigwigs.
Oh, yes. I brought that one last time. In Marie Antoinette, time. Was that late 1700s? It was your status symbol was your wig. Now, lice and everything else was rampant at the time, so it was easier really to shave your head and take your wig off at night and just powder it, delouse it and all that. But the fancier your wig and the bigger and the materials meant the bigger deal you were. And honestly, some of them, I'm talking like absurd, heights. And then, like, remember her ship wig? Like, you could put things in them, like scenes, and they were nuts. Anyway, some people's wigs, it was said, were worth like a common person's yearly salary, which is crazy. So that piece is actually about wig stealing. So whenever there's something, valuable, there's always somebody that will steal it. So they had people, there were guys that would train, or people that would train small children. Okay, remember, like in the old days, a butcher would have a board like that, and you can walk around, there's like a huge half a cow or whatever on there. They would hide a kid on one of those under a sheet. And so when you pass by this person, you just, and they're counting on, you'd be so mortified that you're sitting there with your bald head, especially women, that you wouldn't get chased or anything. And then they would sell it, on the black market or whatever. The fun fact from that one is, when we say, all the big wigs are going to be there, that is where that comes from. Isn't that fun? Because we say stuff all the time, and you never think, well, where'd that come from? But that makes perfect sense. So, anyway, it's just really fun. So, if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask, or please come up, because you cannot see anything from where y'all are sitting. Yes?
What was your most difficult one to you, and which one is your favorite on the history bones?
Oh, the most difficult. Oh gosh, put me on the spot, Stephen. Probably the most time-intensive one, but also one of my favorites was a catacomb piece. you guys know what I mean when I say the catacombs, just chock full, you know, ceiling to floor bones and skulls. I took a bunch of these little skeletons and hand cut every skull, every little knob to where everybody was about this, and then just hand glued them, and it looks incredible. It looks incredible. And the guy that, I cannot remember his name off the top of my head, but I based it on a picture of him in the catacomb, and he's sitting there just kind of casually, looks like an old French painter or something. And he's the guy who invented the lighting that made it possible to take photos in places that dark. And if you look in, and it was, you know, this crazy gas contraption, whatever it was. Anyway, when you look at the photos, if you're just casually glancing, you see people like, you know, with buggies and stuff, or, you know, working. And if you don't look really closely, you cannot tell. But a friend of mine wrote an article on it, and she said, oh yeah, look closer at those people. At that time, it took 17 minutes. You had to sit still for a photo, and none of the workers would agree to sit there that long. So they're dummies. They are literally like stuffed things made to look like people working, because people are like, I'm not standing still. No. I mean, who's going to sit still for 17 minutes, you know? Anyway, it's a hoot, but I love the way that one looks. But if you want to see all of them, just go on Instagram, on History Bones. There are a ton on there, and a lot of fun work in progress pieces, or, you know, how different things were made. It's really fun.
Haven't you done the Harper Theater and a lot of Oxford?
I did a lot of Oxford pieces. That's the one that kind of started the regional pieces. I needed to do something for the annual fundraiser for the Powerhouse in Oxford. And I thought, oh my God, doing the Hoka would be really cool. It's a place that doesn't exist anymore, but it has tons of memories for a lot of people. Oh my gosh, when I made that, the floodgates opened on people coming and saying, oh my gosh, we used to do this, and then we went there, and then I met this, and then we ate that, and then, then I wrote this on the bathroom walls. Like, the stories were amazing, and that kind of got the ball rolling, like the gin, Smitty's, Dino's Pizza. You wouldn't believe the stories that people have. And in Tiny Oxford, every one of those places is gone now except for the Nelson's house. The one where they shot part of the movie there, I can't remember, but it's this huge house that half the tourists come to town and think is Roanoke because it looks a whole lot like it. But all those buildings are gone. So honestly, those are kind of my most favorite things to make now, places that aren't around anymore. And if people have just a single image of a place, I can recreate it. I gotta have something to go by, but it's really, really, really fun. I've done several surprise commissions. I'm dying to tell you one right now, but I'm still waiting for the husband to give it to her, so I can't say a word. And this place is so small, people will know, but you know, what was one? Just stores that people's parents used to own and that have long been gone. You know, the husband will commission it, and then secretly, it's just so fun, and just see this surprise, and to try to get all the details of the place just right. I have my secret underground network of investigators, that's what I call them, my Oxford people, that they know to keep a secret. I'm working on a logo so we can have like a PI club at this point. Like, do you remember what color was the floor? Was it tile? You know, this, that, and the other. That's really, really fun. So it's kind of like a detective slash researcher slash genealogy puzzle almost, and then you also are making it. So I can't believe I'm actually getting to do it right now. It's only taken me 50 years to get to this point, but honestly, I've made stuff forever, but it hasn't really gotten to like explode until I combined all those things. Making stuff, genealogy, research, nostalgia, regional things. It's just amazing. Hey, whittling, I mean, you name it, engineering. You have to use every little bit of knowledge that you've acquired over the years to figure some of these out, but they're
Well,
really
and I
fun.
know it varies, but like, say that building there, how long did it take you to do that?
I'd say 2 or 3 weeks. A building like this, when it has a gazillion windows, like this one, oh, that takes forever. Some of them I can whip out pretty quickly. Obviously, something like this would be pretty quick, but most of them take, at least a couple of weeks. Some have taken me months before. I did a city grocery piece. I bet I worked on that off and on for 4 months. It was the most detailed thing to date that I've done, but that was really fun as well. I'm talking about the interior and the bar with all those doodahs in the shelves in the back, and that ended up being like a miniature history of Oxford, because each one of those little items had a story behind it, and I could always find somebody that would know the story behind it, and they were hilarious. Found out some secrets too. One of those old retro lunch boxes at the top is full of drink napkins that have, a lot of writers and a lot of people come through City Grocery that have scribbled things on those napkins, and a bunch of them are in one of those lunch boxes in the top. I mean, there's no telling who's in there. So, anyway, it's very fun.
Didn't you do a poster for South Arts, that TV show?
True South?
True South.
I did Doe's Eat Place, the miniature, and then I did a miniature of the tour bus, the True South tour bus. And my friend Joe York, the photographer, came over and we literally laid in my driveway taking a photo shoot. It was hysterical. I mean, we were in the dirt, and we'd have to flick little pebbles out of the way because they look like boulders in front of, if a building is this tall and like tiny little weeds look like, huge, jungle plants. It was hysterical, but that was really fun. That was really fun. They're a fun group.
The ones that you've done the interiors on, how are you able to view those? Do they open, or does the roof come off?
Different ways. I have one I'm about to do in the Shelby County Fair House that I want to be able, it's a 2-story, and they want the interior done as well, so I thought I'd have one wall on a hinge where you could, pull it out like that if you want to. I've done what they call is a book nook, which I hate that name, it's pretty corny, but it's the idea is it's long and tall and slender like a really thick book, and you put it in a bookcase, so you kind of like look at it, it's like looking down an alley, and I did the Purvis Pool Hall that way, which is kind of neat because at the time when that was open, it was kind of an unwritten rule that no girls were allowed. And so the idea that you could only see from the street, the sidewalk, is kind of cool for that one, because that's how most people would have. They would have like peeked in if the door came open real quick. You know what I mean? That would have been the only thing. But I found out a lot of juicy stuff about Purvis Pool Hall. Oh my gosh, that was amazing. Really fun stuff. That was cool.
Well, then do you just keep a file, like of your stories?
I have a big file
Gossip.
cabinet. I have a big file cabinet. I try to keep a file on each thing because I do so much research and put so much time into it, and if I want to refer to it later, I can. Or also I just like looking at it sometimes. It's a shame to just toss it. There's a lot of resource photos that are hard to find, and notes, and like for Purvis Pool Hall, It was also a secret commission, so I couldn't put anything, you know, it's one thing if you can get on Facebook and say, hey, does anybody remember, what did the candy machine look like at the back of Purvis, you know, whatever. When you can't do any of that, I met probably 4 men, grown men, in secret, to sketch out aerial maps in secret of the pool hall, like where everything was and where this secret string was, so if the cops came in, they could pull it. Sorry, Facebook, but it's a way long time ago. But you know, just it's just so fun. I'm not throwing any of that away. I'm kind of a pack rat for stuff. I have all the little sketches, all the little notes.
Have you thought about a book?
Yeah, I have. I'm so disorganized right now. I wish somebody would just come and say, hey, let me help you do a book. But my friend, thank goodness, helped me do, well, I say helped. He took he's a professional photographer in New Orleans, and he knows how to make books. So I would have never gotten it done had it not been for him. Thank you, Pablo. But the history bones would be great all in a book. Great, because they're best consumed, you know, where you can read and just kind of pore over the photos and look at the details. And then I'd love for my next book to be Tiny Mississippi, because I've done a bunch of stuff all over the state now. But I want to get a representative from each area. You know, I've done some juke joints, and I've done something from the coast, but I mean, I want to get like a great variety all over the state. And right now, like I said, my child is in college, so I can't just do whatever I want. I need to make sure it's gonna sell. But that is for sure my plan right now. I'm saying that how do you say it? I'm speaking it into existence. Is that how you say that? Don't make it happen.
What do you make your skeletons out of?
I actually buy the skeletons in bulk because they would be so complicated to make. It would just be that much more time because the scenes and the clothing, and they're mostly covered up anyway, you know, that what I do is they're the kind of skeletons that are just like this. They won't do anything you want them to. So I make a wire armature for them that's pretty stout. And that way you can make their bodies, I can bend them to my will, literally. So I can make them do anything I want. So that was a biggie when I figured that out, because the first one I did was Abraham Lincoln in his box at the theater with his wife and John Wilkes Booth coming in behind them, and everybody is sitting like, it is fun, and I love the idea because it's that, what I wanted to play with was that second in time, because John Wilkes Booth is doing this with the gun, and it's the second in time, right before he shoots, where history will be forever different after that. And that is kind of what sparked the whole like, there's so many cool things in history that are just deserve to be looked at. I mean, and of course everybody knows that's not an obscure one, but most of them, I try to do ones that people haven't heard of or most people haven't heard of. But I mean,
Typhoid Mary.
that is a good one and very timely. So that one is really fun, and she has, what I like about that one, and obviously she's not obscure either, but what I like about that one is when you glance at the scene, it just looks like a grandmotherly figure making a dessert in a kitchen. But if you read it, and it says Typhoid Mary, and then you look at what she's making, and her filthy apron where you can see she's been wiping her hands like this, they have recently, or the last few years, figured out that the dish they think contaminated people was her signature dish of peaches and homemade vanilla ice cream, because the peaches you wouldn't cook. She would just have them in her hands, which she didn't wash. And that is how she kept spreading them, because cooking the stuff, you know, would generally cook out germs and stuff, but, then when you read that, it gives it like, oh, whoa, you know, a whole different meaning. Where it looks like maybe Julia Child except skeleton form, and then it's like, oh, whoa, Typhoid Mary, okay, whoa. But that one, I like doing a different spin. If it's something that you've heard of, I want to do a different spin on it. But I love doing ones that most people aren't familiar with. So,
What's your most obscure one, do you think? Or can you say?
well, there's some pretty gruesome ones. Steven said don't bring your really gruesome ones. But those aren't super obscure. There is one, Peter and Catherine the Great. Peter the Great, not the one that we're all familiar with, but I think it was the set before them. You know, there were several Peters. And if I had it with me, I've done so many pieces I can't remember all the names and dates, but Peter's best friend ended up having an affair with Catherine, and when he found out, he had the guy beheaded and had made Catherine have his head in a jar by their bedside, until Peter died. He wouldn't let it be removed. So that's the other fun thing about History Bones, is if you think everything is wackadoo now, no, it has always been beyond the knockers. Seriously, I mean, you just can't make this. You can make up crazier stuff. Seriously, that's wild. But I have them sitting in bed, like reading, like any other couple. That's what's funny about that one, is they look like all of us, except it might be a tablet or an iPad, you know, now. But they've got their readers on. But then you look over and you're like, oh my God, there's a head in the jar. So they're fascinating. There's one of Stagecoach Mary, sorry, I cannot remember the years. I think late 1700s. Born a slave, and she ended up out in Montana, of all places, and was known for, this one has to be a movie, has to be. She was kind of a big woman. She was known for smoking cigars and drinking heavy. She was the only woman in town allowed in the saloon. She drove a stagecoach and was known to be so punctual. No, and you know Montana weather. I mean, it is insane. She was never late. And she had wolves attack her. She had people try to rob her. I mean, like, this woman, she always had a pistol and a shotgun on her. She was a total badass. I'm sorry. She really was. And never late. And that's kind of where she got her nickname, like, you can time it by the stagecoach. And she was never late. And she was responsible for opening up, apparently, I'm going to get this wrong, I'm sure, but a section of Montana as far as those people in the really remote areas getting information from the rest of the world, where there was no other, that was their only postal service. She was taking the mail, I'm sorry, that whole thing was a mail carrier route, as well as, you know, carrying cargo, but the whole thing was a postal route. She also was known for betting that she could knock out any man in one punch, and she never lost. And I'm telling you, I'm such a history nerd. We were watching, was it Hell on Wheels? It was some show. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm messing it up. But there's some historical TV show now where they had a character come in, and she was driving a stagecoach, and her name was Mary, and I was like, say what? And she ended up punching a guy out in the bar, betting $2, and I was like, Stagecoach Mary! You know, I mean, and if you didn't know that, of course, you're just thinking, well, they just wrote this cool character into the show, but it's really, I love it when they do that, when the characters are based on somebody real. So maybe she'll, you know, if they noticed, maybe somebody will make that into a movie. I mean, I can't even tell y'all all the details, so it's just wild. But there's just endless stories that are fascinating, and some are horrible, some are like heroes that have been forgotten by time that don't deserve to be. Another great one was, I've forgotten her name now. In the Revolutionary War, she was part of a ring of spies for America, or U.S. And her part of, oh my gosh, I can't think of words. Sending her part of the message forward was hanging her laundry. Like, this was when, somebody would drop, like, go dig a hole and put the bag in there, and then somebody would come and get that bag and then take it. She lived on a bluff by the river, and her hanging her laundry was a code. She had a long black slip coat that meant something, and then had handkerchiefs, perfect white handkerchiefs. And the order and the number of things she hung were a code to the ships passing by as far as where the enemy boats were and what code they were in. I mean, what? That's amazing. And it's the perfect cover, because if anybody came up and was like, what are you doing? And she's like, bro, I'm trying to hang my laundry. Why don't you go away? I mean, it's perfect. So anyway, I think she was in a show, Turn or something like that, a TV show. But anyway, I could talk about this stuff all day.
I have two questions.
Yeah.
One, how's your studio organized, if it is? And two, what tools are you using to do such tiny things?
Well, first of all, my studio it looks like it is like a tornado hit it. But I do know where everything is. It is packed. If you have sensory issues, you should never come to my studio, because it's a lot of stuff. I have materials all over the place, projects in partial, modes, finished or not. People give me materials and all the time, and materials can be anything, like probably what a lot of people think is garbage, because you just never know what you can make little things out of. My tools, I could be a lot more advanced in tools. Right now, all I use are just scissors, a metal ruler, and I have one of those heavy, it's not an X-Acto knife, but the ones you can flick up and down, and then when it gets dull, you break off the tip, and they're like 12 little blades on there. I use that to whittle. That's not even what you're supposed to whittle with, but I just like it, and it's heavy, and that's just what I'm used to. I've only cut myself a few times. I did cut my leg once, in an over-enthusiastic whittling session one night. But, I've got tweezers, but honestly, just very rudimentary tools. I don't have anything great. I keep saying I'm going to, because they have specialized tools, but honestly, half of it is just like, I already can do this. I don't need the special, that's just more stuff to put in this office, and it's already just crazy town in there. It's packed.
How do you store the ones that you haven't sold?
I made a bunch of really high shelves in my studio, so I usually keep them in like a clear plastic bag, and then just keep them up on the shelves, because they get really dusty and spidery. We live out just enough out in the country to where, if you work at night at all, I'll have like a huge bug land on what I'm working on. Every time you open the door, something can come in. So it's not precious out there. But my cats are not allowed in ever for any reason. I have one guard cat who, even in the rain, will sit at my studio door, and I put a little blanket pad thing out there for him, and he sat out there in the rain and thunder last night and waits for me. He's the sweetest, my boyfriend.
Lee, you made a lawn lawn chair out of a doll shoe, is that what it was?
Yes, that, I was working on somebody's house, and the house was like this big, and he had, it looked like a wicker chair or something, one of those like with a curved back, and you know, the arms kind of go like this, and I tried to make it out of wire and this other stuff, and it was so small that everything looked too bulky, and it looked ridiculous, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna have to get creative here, go through all my materials, all my junk, and I found 2 little doll shoes that I had used the doll parts for something else, and you just never know. So I took the doll shoe and I cut it like that, and so then you do have a cup with a curved back, and then I cut like a little divot out of the back, and then I added wire legs and painted the whole thing. It looked great. Oh my God, it looked great. I couldn't believe it. So that I love when stuff like that works. Love it.
Well, are each of those, are any pieces separate, or is that all glued together?
Oh, it's all glued together. The bus and the little pencil and notepad on the Lobotomobile, they're not glued down. But everybody else, this guy's not glued down because I haven't figured out how to fiddle with the fog just yet. He's been on the back burner for a little bit, but I try to, because otherwise it would just be chaos. You know, you just touch something and everything falls all over the place. So, just the arrangement of the piece, or angles, or size. I was like, I hope I have enough to say. There's never a lull, because there's so much to talk about, the story. Even if they weren't here, just the stories are fun.
The story, not to mention all this, the story.
If I had nothing up here, the stories are plenty to talk about.
Not a boring one in the group.
Thank you. Oh, hey. Nice to meet you.
Too.
I'm glad you came. Honestly, it was pouring so hard this morning, I thought, man, nobody's coming out today. This is a great crowd. This is fantastic. It was. Yeah.
Sometimes we don't have.
Really? Okay, good. Well, I mean, I had no idea. I don't know here, but I can't remember where people gathered. I'm glad you did.
I didn't realize that this was together.
Well, and that's the difference between, like, the history bones are all skeletons, and then my regular commissions are just, don't have anything to do with skeleton, you know what I mean? Don't have anything to do with skeleton.
You know, it's really
There's different, a lot of regional or southern.
going in on the backside.
I'm sorry.
To me, that's just like so tough. And I don't think I have the patience.
Hey, do this for me again, though, Lee. They're coming to.
We're in my house, right? See.
Honestly, guys, I didn't even think about books. Luckily, I had a box in my car. I got here and Steven said, "Did you bring your books?" I was like, "Oh my gosh!"
And I always know
wait,
when we're in a meeting, your southern accent. I think I got one till it's just southern.
You know, my grandmother used to say, water. Instead of water.
I think the prize winner is Kay Powell. Though. You ever heard Kay Powell?
Yes.
Look at that pencil.
We'll look forward to your
Are you Mr. Steve?
Honestly, I think the time
Hey Steve, put your hand near that little table, so
Near
for
the
scale,
table?
yeah. And put your fingernail close to those little tools.
Oh, I missed that. Somebody from where?
Right.
Lobotomies with an eye.
The name is on there. Look on the sheet, the name is on there. What is your blood?
Steve, would you open one of those books?
Oh,
Let me just scoot back here real quick, get out of your way.
I'm not kidding. Which one were you looking at? Oh, the barber surgeon? That one maybe, I either use paint and look at separate, or